And yes, we are actually live, Adam. Oh, goodness, let's not jinx it just yet, but it seems like your old pal may have kicked off his first show without having to have the amazing and very generous with this time Josh Engelman behind the scenes hooking me up. Adam, talk to me. What's going on? We're having a moment here.
Yeah, it's nice. No tech issues so far. 30 seconds into the show, it's probably a new record for us.
All right. Well, now that we've said that, Adam, ship my router DFS is going to be good. But yeah, we've got a 7-gamer, 6 starting at 7 o'clock, 1 at 5 o'clock here. So let's just briefly touch on that one. That is because they have some single game contests for that, and that will be the Milwaukee Bucks and the New York Knicks. What are your thoughts about the Knicks at this point in time with today's... Wait, which way's the wind blowing? There we go. Which way is their rotation going to work today, do you think? Because no one can truly deal with Giannis on their team.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of assume it's just the same that it has been. They play the hot hand for the most part. Guys like Hardaway get their minutes. They probably will want to have Vonleh out there as much as possible for defensive reasons, as long as he can stay out of foul trouble. Still Enes Kanter should play a bunch of minutes.
All right. Is there anybody in particular you would like to focus on if you're going to play that 1-game slate there?
Giannis.
Just Giannis. Do whatever you can to get him in.
Yeah, on a 1-game slate, sure.
All right, I'm just double checking here that we are live because no one's responded to me in chat. Where's the fun in that? Let's see here. Let me go to YouTube and find out. In the meantime, do you ever play the 1-game slates? Because I've kind of gotten into it at the very night slate. I like to play in the low dollar stuff and then figure out what players I don't know, fading for lack of a better word, and make a little team with them, putting one of them in the captain's spot.
Yeah, I have not played them at all. I just don't enjoy them, don't feel like spending the time figuring them out.
All right, well, good. We are live. Awesome. There we go. All right, well, we're good. Now let's get to the main slate. That was the little appetizer, easing in, just me making sure that everything's working here. Reminder, if you have not yet signed up for Osmo.com, you can get 1 week of premium access, everything, Slack, the Fantasy Cruncher add-on, and of course projections for the players, for multiple sports, ownership projections, which break down by slate, by the way, which is pretty cool. Use the promo code DFS strategy when you are at checkout. So you would just go to osmo.com/join, pick the 1 week package, fill in your information, very last field, type in one word, DFS strategy, hit submit. There you go. You're going to be launched and live. Adam, it is the holiday season. We're going to be doing 24 days of giveaways here. And I know that your sister really enjoyed the FanVice subscription you got her last year for the holidays. Are you going to be, tucking an Osmo.com subscription into her stocking this year?
Yeah, easily, makes me her favorite family member, just giving her DFS subs every Christmas. So I'm definitely going to keep that going forward.
It's the gift that keeps on giving. Perhaps her boyfriend can utilize it. We'll see. But there you go. I wouldn't want her to miss out on all of the fun. As we ease into things here, let's look at some of our injury news. Up here, we've got Lauri Markkanen is on the horizon. Still going to be a couple weeks away, but something to keep in mind there. We have, I get my list from last night. Steph Curry is making his return, not to bury the lead. Now, we don't think he's going to play 1,000,000 minutes today, but he will be back after his absence. We know that I had mentioned on the podcast, which if you guys are not aware, we do now have the Saturday podcast. So if you're out running errands, you want to download that, you can bring Adam and I along with you. And we do a quick position by position breakdown to get you set up foundationally, of course, with the Osmo Early Bird podcast. But Andre Iguodala had played 36 minutes, which was nearing his season high in the last game. So it would not surprise me if he gets a bit of a breather. Joe Harris was out on Friday. Let's see. DeMar Carroll dealing with the sore foot. He did play on Friday. Jeff Green, sore back, ended up starting. We'll have to see what happens. Sore heart for anybody that follows the Wizards. That was not very fun, Adam. When you do your show on Monday with Lofty, I don't think you're going to be able to zing in. Perhaps the Washington football team.
Yeah, gonna have to root pretty hard for the Redskins so that Lofty can't make my life miserable all week.
We've got Otto Porter, who was away from the team for a personal issue, but should be here on Saturday. Again, that game tips off at 7, so we will know more as we get up to lock there. We have Victor Oladipo is going to be out indefinitely with his right knee issue. Chris Paul and Gerald Green both played last night. Tis a back-to-back for them, so we'll have to see what happens. That's going to put a little bit of a damper there on one James Harden. He's still going to be one of our top raw points plays. We'll talk about that as we go through here game by game. Al Horford was out on Friday. That was rest. He is expected to play. Decent matchup for him going against Karl Anthony Towns. Jaylen Brown is dealing with the sore tailbone. Let's see. And then Bagley was questionable with a knee issue. So there we are. And for those of you who are getting ready to do a little DFS, the Ravens, for DFS football, the Ravens have just placed Alex Collins on the IR. So if you want a running back that's going to run the ball with a quarterback that doesn't throw the ball, go use Gus the Bus with impunity. Any other things that you think I missed here? Alonzo McKinney is out again, but he's kind of an also ran at this point.
You might have mentioned it. I may have just not heard it, but definitely keep an eye on Chris Paul's status with it being a back-to-back home game against the Bulls that they should be able to win with or without him. Just something to keep an eye on because obviously it changes the entire slate if he were to get the night off.
All right, and then David Nwaba up to questionable at this point. We had seen Larry Nance Jr. get a lot of starts. I'm not going to say he got a lot of fantasy points. He got more fantasy points than Adam and I combined his last few games, but not quite what we were hoping for with that opportunity. Opportunity squandered, shall we say. All right, let's start off with the first game here. Oh, why not? We'll just go with Brooklyn at Washington. We have Washington favored, and I don't think that matters, but they are favored by 7. We have just shy of a 230 over-under. This is vying for one of the top over-unders on the slate. We have Golden State and Detroit that is right there neck and neck with it. The remainder of the games are about 10 points behind it with the exception of Indiana and Sacramento. Looking at Washington here on a back-to-back, they are hosting a team that's actually trying, that can be feisty at times, but runs really, really deep in Brooklyn. What do you think you like here for the Wizards?
So Otto Porter expected to be back today after missing yesterday's game for personal reasons. That obviously tightens up their rotation a bit, and we should expect to see Keefe go back to being the backup center. Probably no minutes for Jan Mahinmi, which is good. I think this is actually a much better spot for Keefe than yesterday was because, obviously he disappointed a high percentage of people yesterday, but he ended up playing a bunch of time as the backup 4 with Mahinmi on the floor. Now he should get back to being the backup 5, which means more rebounding in a great spot against this Brooklyn team. Still gets to play with the second unit, so he gets plenty of usage. I think should play somewhere between 32 and 36 minutes. So going right back to the well on Keefe here, really, really, really like him a lot. Porter, I think, is okay. Price tag, not super appealing, but should play around like 32 minutes. Same for Oubre. But other than Keefe, it's really the Washington backcourt that I'm interested in. The game yesterday obviously blew out against Philadelphia. It made guys from Washington just completely useless. But the nice thing is that it allowed more rest for Bradley Beal, who has, in competitive games lately, been playing every single minute of the second half pretty consistently, getting to 42 or 44 minutes in competitive games. And Scott Brooks has talked about that he's playing him too many minutes, but also doesn't really seem too eager to stop playing him too many minutes. So the fact that he was able to kind of rest for 7 minutes 2 games ago against the Pels, only played 19 minutes yesterday because of foul trouble in the blowout. He's basically, gotten multiple days off essentially going into tonight's game. So if it does stay competitive, I assume you get 40 plus minutes out of Bradley Beal, which is really appealing. John Wall should get 36 to 38. So most interested in the two guards and then Markieff Morris here from the Wizards side.
All right. Dwight Howard, of course, is going to be out for the next 2 months. He will be having surgery to alleviate some nerve pressure that has apparently been the source of his, I don't know, let's not even qualify it, his health. His social media presence, well, that's another issue. But again, to each their own. Looking to the other side here, we have the Brooklyn Nets coming off a double overtime, heartbreaking loss to the Memphis Grizzlies here. But we did see Rondé Hollis-Jefferson with 38 minutes. That is a boatload. We got Jared Allen with 39. Russell had 45. Dinwiddie got the start for Joe Harris. He had 43. Well, was it technically Dinwiddie or was it Alan Crabb? Who knows, because they tweak their starting lineup from time to time. Crabb only had 23 minutes, lowest of all the starters off the bench. Again, DeMar Carroll, we have mentioned that he has been dealing with a sore foot. 39 minutes. Pretty impressive. They ran a very tight rotation here because, wait for it, much like Denver, Brooklyn does hate Kenneth Farid, so he was a TNP coach's decision in a double overtime game. Adam, he had the same minutes as you and I. Shabazz Napier, 18 points, 24 minutes. Congrats on probably your season high. And then Ed Davis for 19 minutes. A lot of minutes there. Heavy usage for the 9 guys that did play. What does that do? Does that dampen anything that you're considering from these guys, perhaps for Hollis Jefferson or for DeMar Carroll?
Maybe a little bit, more so for Carroll than for anyone, because there are a couple of things I think working against Carroll. For one, he's someone who is frequently injured, and it wouldn't be surprising at all for the Nets to kind of try and not play him that many minutes tonight. But also, Alan Crabb only played 23 minutes in that game. So even if you map out the Nets rotations and assume Joe Harris is out, I still think it's more likely you get like 24 to 26 minutes from DeMar Carroll than anything close to what you got last night. And obviously he played like 29 minutes in regulation last night. But so I'm not that high on him. I still really like Hollis Jefferson, though. It sucks that he played 38 minutes yesterday before, going into tonight's game. But it's a spot where he should just do really, really well against this Wizards team in a pace-up game against a team that does not rebound well. They don't defend well. And it's just like the perfect spot for Rondae Hollis Jefferson to get going. I wouldn't be surprised either to see him get some time at center in place of Ed Davis, which would be more appealing as well in a game that, obviously is going to go small. So I really like Hollis Jefferson here. I really like D'Angelo Russell. I think his $7,200 price tag on DraftKings is really appealing. Obviously, it's not that appealing playing a guy like Russell who, just played 46 minutes yesterday. Easily could have tired legs here, and that's a risk, but I think that the upside's still there. And then Jared Allen, it's just a great spot for him against a terrible rebounding team. He should be able to put up pretty big numbers here at only $5,400.
Yeah, this is just where we hope they aren't too lead-legged when they come into this game, because I'm looking forward to some of the Nets here in a bit of a pace-up spot. I did want to call it. Chad is mentioning Shabazz Napier. We do have to talk about him. He is part of our discount dandies on DraftKings. He's 3,200. I'm assuming he's probably close to minimum priced over there on FanDuel, so he would be in the bucket of droppable players. But even before last night's double OT game when he had 24 minutes, he's been playing a solid 16 to 18 minutes for the last few games. He, of course, is just, he's an offensive guy. It's all, well, he's not offensive, but his game is both ways. He generally scores and does not do much else. He may fall into some rebounds, but this is a perfect game. Adam has mentioned this a gazillion times, that the Wizards, sloppy, fast-paced. This is where you get the guys without the general peripherals pick stuff up in these games. This would be a perfect Detroit Kentavious Caldwell-Pope game against this particular iteration of the Washington Wizards. He would play 40 minutes and probably luck into 50 fantasy points with about 10 actual real points scored. So we do have to consider Napier. Anything else that you want to mention from this?
Napier and Dinwiddie entirely dependent on, Dinwiddie not so much. Napier entirely dependent on Joe Harris. If Harris is in, I think you probably only get about 16 minutes, actually probably like 14 to 16 from Napier, just essentially being the backup point guard to D'Angelo Russell. But if Harris is out, then you see Napier essentially back up Russell and Dinwiddie and should get around 24 minutes again at a really cheap price point. So I like Napier a lot. One of the better value plays on the slate if Harris is out. If Harris is in, I don't have interest. Dinwiddie, I think is okay if Harris is in. Should still play probably 28 to 30 minutes in a nice matchup against Washington. But if Harris is out, we saw Dinwiddie get the start yesterday, played 48 minutes in the double overtime, so 38 in regulation. Even if you project him for 34 to 36 in this spot, it becomes a really good spot for Dinwiddie. So a bump for Dinwiddie if Harris is out, and then a huge bump for Napier going from no interest to probably one of the better values.
Right. And then Tomas Satoransky is the last guy I do want to mention. He is getting some more run from the coaching staff. He's one of the, him and Kelly Oubre are really the young talent, I guess we could say, on the Wizards outside of Thomas Bryant, but we know he's going to get his 16 to 19 minutes. What do you think about Satoransky at 3,400?
No thanks.
Okay.
Assuming Porter's back, I just
Okay.
don't have interest in playing Satoransky, who just really isn't a key part of this rotation.
All right, let's head on to our other 7 o'clock game, the Golden State Warriors against the Detroit Pistons. This one is going to be in Detroit. We have Golden State road favorites by 5. They will be getting back Steph Curry. While we don't know how much he will play, I've seen people commenting that he won't have a minutes limit. Well, he's probably not going to play 40 minutes. They waited a long time for him to come back. So, but I would suspect 30 seems about like a reasonable range of outcomes here. What do you think for Curry's minutes as you're looking to project those tonight?
I'm projecting him for his normal run unless I hear otherwise. If this game stays close, I have him for 34 minutes. It's normally what he plays. He's been going through full contact practices. There's no reason to think that the Warriors are rushing him back at all, especially in this matchup. So I fully expect, unless we get specific news otherwise, that Curry is just not limited here.
All right. Now, how much for you is this going to dampen Kevin Durant? Now, he's 10,800, which is, maybe with Curry back, 1,000 too much, but it's a 6-game slate, so everything is relative here. He will be one of the higher raw point players. We have him up in the top 5 here for our projections, and then the other guys we're kind of looking at, and no surprise, it's going to be the expensive guys. That's generally how things work here for the NBA at the high end. But we've got Blake Griffin, Wall, Drummond, Harden, and Karl Anthony Towns are all there with one Kevin Durant, and those guys are the 6 most expensive plays essentially outside of Kawhi Leonard floating around there on the slate. What do you think about Durant? Reasonably good matchup. I'm not too worried about the defense doing anything to hinder his game. We've seen him just make amazing shots. We know throughout his career, he's got his MVPs. He's one of the most efficient players that there is. Are you considering him in your early look at the highest price tag on tonight's DraftKings slate?
I think he's okay because of the size of the slate. He certainly takes a hit with Curry being back. Alongside Curry this season, he's averaged 1.3 fantasy points per minute. Without Curry on the floor, he's at 1.52. So clearly takes a hit there. He will play some minutes without Curry, obviously, because Steve Kerr staggers their minutes. And he should still play, 36 to 38 minutes. So from the raw point standpoint, he, like you said, he should be one of the higher scorers on the slate. I think he probably makes more sense on FanDuel than DraftKings, because on FanDuel, you obviously have to roster the 2 small forwards, and getting those raw points at that position is really appealing. Whereas on DraftKings, you have to also compare Durant to players at other positions, because essentially roster construction is kind of positionless. And so the opportunity cost of rostering him on DraftKings, I think, is higher than it is on FanDuel.
All right, looking at chat here. Shout out to Eric Wilson. Edub says, finally catch EMAC live. Sounds like you're under the weather. Feel better, buddy. Well, I stayed up late last night, actually really late. It was probably 1 or 1:30 before I went to bed. As Adam and I were recording the podcast, he watched me down some Mountain Dew, which normally I would never do because I like to go to bed early. But I'm wearing my Mountain Dew t-shirt in honor of that. Last night, Adam, I stayed up to watch my alma mater. They won the Pac-12 championship game 10-3. And I will say this was one of the more exciting 10-3 games. They only had 19 first downs. They had about 300 combined yards. But each play was exciting because you were like, get the first down, don't turn the ball over. And it was just felt like playoff hockey or watching a World Cup game, because you're like, okay, we've got the ball. What are we going to do? Don't turn it over. And then it's like, oh my God, we're on defense. Don't let them score. It was one of those games. So yeah, one of the more exciting 10-3 games I will ever watch, I'm sure. But I'm a little tuckered out. I'm sure there will be an old guy nap later this afternoon, because I really would prefer to not get sick as we head into the holiday season here. Looking at our other guys here, I think the guy, and this is what I don't know, so this is where your interpretive skills will come in very handy. Klay Thompson has really kind of, he started out the season in a funk, then had that amazing, set the NBA three-point record game, and then Curry went out, and he's been playing a boatload of minutes. He's approaching high 30s, if not more, every game. He is just on a string of, since that game where he scored 52 points back at the end of October, he has topped 20 points in every game but two. That's pretty impressive, and most of these are in the mid 20s. A couple of them have gone over 30. He's draining multiple 3-pointers every game. You get the half-point bonus there on depending on the site that you're playing. He's picking up some assists, which we usually don't see from him. I think that's going to go away a little bit, and then he's falling into his normal rebounds. But at 7,100 on DraftKings, how are you feeling about him in this particular matchup?
Not that interested. The issue with Thompson is just that the price tag has come up with Curry being out. He still has upside because, I mean, when he gets hot, Golden State will ride the hot hand and they'll give him the ball. But he's just competing with Curry for looks now, which makes his probability of getting his ceiling lower. And this season with Curry and Durant on the floor, you have a 22.6% usage rate from Thompson. When he plays alongside Durant without Curry, you're up around 30%. When he plays without Curry or Durant, which was the case often when Curry was out because Steve Kerr was staggering Thompson's minutes with Durant, you had a usage rate up around 40%. So in these games without Curry, he was averaging about a 33% usage rate. But now he's going to be playing a bunch of minutes in an environment where he's going to have a usage rate most nights between 22 and 23%, but you're still paying for that 33% usage rate from a scoring dependent player. So it's not to say that he can't get there, but it's much less likely now than it was when Curry was out, and the price tag is elevated to account for Curry being out still.
All right, and then again, 6-game slate. So just touching on a couple of these bench guys, any interest at all in, and they're all cheap. So Jerebko's had a couple okay games. He's kind of looks to be the scorer now. I'm going to guess with the second unit now with Curry back. But you've got Jerebko, Iguodala, Kevon Looney, who is a mess here and there. Jordan Bell, who can get the hustle stats and may or may not score 10 points. Anybody else from the Golden State side?
No.
All right, moving to the Detroit side here. Again, both these teams are, like, if memory serves, about in the mid-teens for pace. So, and they're adjacent to each other in the standings for the full season, and that's kind of what I generally look at just to gauge barometer of where things are going. So, no real pace up or pace down for either of these games, or pardon me, either of these teams. On the other side here, we know where the fantasy points are going to be concentrated for Detroit. It's going to be in their front court with Blake Griffin and Andre Drummond. Now, they are $100 separating the two of them this evening on DraftKings. Do you have a preference, one or the other? We know Blake quite familiar with Golden State, having spent most of his career there with the Clippers, playing Golden State multiple times per year. He does not have to deal with Draymond Green, so that could change things for him. What do you like from the Detroit front court?
Blake and Drummond. I mean, it's the same as always, really, for Golden State here. I think that it's a spot both of them should have success, especially with Draymond Green being out. Not concerned about pace issues or anything here. The Warriors do play faster with Steph Curry. Their pace with Durant on and Curry off this year is 96 possessions per game. With Curry on alongside Durant, it jumps to 105. Their defensive rating has gotten better when Curry is on with Durant as well. But that's not something that I'm really concerned about here with these two, especially because a lot of those minutes are with Draymond Green on the floor. Also, I expect that Green, has the bigger impact than Curry does on defense, but Curry has the bigger impact on pace. So I like the spot for Blake. I like it for Drummond. I think that I prefer Drummond on DraftKings because you can roster the two centers and they're basically the same price. On FanDuel, where you can only roster one center, and it's always a pretty high upside position with a high opportunity cost, I prefer going to Blake.
All right, again, no stone unturned here. Looking at the Detroit backcourt here, we may see a bit of a three-guard action. We can look to Reggie Jackson, of course, will be the starting main guy. Ish Smith and Langston Galloway have been taking turns cutting into each other's production, but in a game that may go a little smaller than what we see from some of the other Eastern Conference teams that Detroit has to face a lot, we've got those guys in the mix, and, well, let's just say no to Stanley Johnson. What do you think about the backcourt? Anything worthwhile to you?
If you're playing like 150 lineups and you want to take a shot on a guy like Ish Smith or even Reggie Jackson, who is obviously the more secure play out of the two, he should get somewhere between 26 and 30 minutes. I think that's fine. But keep in mind that we've seen, and this applies more so to Ish than it does to Reggie Jackson, but we've seen the fringe, like not even fringe rotation guys, but the kind of the bench group be really, really volatile in terms of their minutes here because they just have so many bodies that they rotate through, whether it's Ish getting more minutes or Langston Galloway. We've seen Brown getting more minutes, but now they also have Luke Kennard, who Dwayne Casey said could play today, and that would make things even messier. So I really don't trust any of that group. Obviously there's a path for one of them to get to 26, 28 minutes and have a good game, but I just think it's a really, really messy situation.
All right, let's continue on here. Reminder, if you have not yet signed up for Osmo.com, you can get a 1-week free trial by using the promo code DFS strategy, all one word. You can go to Osmo.com/join, go up there, pick the 1-week package, fill out your information, very last field, put in DFS strategy, all one word. Make sure you get a package that does include the Fantasy Cruncher add-on. Boom, hit submit, and you're going to be set. You'll get your little notification on how to sign up for Slack, and you will be off to the races looking at all sorts of goodness behind the paywall. You think the stuff's good in front? Oh boy, you should see the stuff behind the paywall. Ownership projections, one of my favorite things that we have. All right, Adam, you'll probably know the answer to this, but we do like to have a little bit of trivia because it's not a show without me trying to zing you just a tiny bit. What do you think the Houston Rockets' pace is on the season? Rankings.
I know they're low. I don't have it in front of me.
They are 29th. Now, this is kind of part of a larger conversation. These are the preconceived notions that we think about. It's like Houston, oh great, up-tempo team. They're still pretty efficient, but they eat up so much of the shot clock before they start doing their scoring. Offense or defense, not necessarily the best, but goodness, they are ahead of just Memphis. And that's it. This is sort of how we think of Utah being a great defensive team. Well, not so much this year. But Houston playing proportionally much slower than we would have expected. Chicago, on the other hand, they're a middle of the pack, checking in at number 14 there. Both these teams played last night. On back-to-backs, we do have Detroit, Brooklyn, Washington, Chicago, Houston, Boston, and Cleveland. We'll get, of course, to Boston and Cleveland down the show. But looking at the Bulls here, what are we going to do with Wendell Carter Jr.? He had the game we've all been waiting for last night. 28 points, 7 rebounds. That is a very exciting score. Led the team. Hell, he was one of 2 Bulls in double digits against the Pistons. Jabari Parker had 12. Talk to me here a little bit about Wendell Carter. We only get 2 centers, and he is center only once again on DraftKings.
Yeah, I mean, I think the DraftKings price is just still too cheap at $4,600 on FanDuel with power forward eligibility. Obviously, it's just a more appealing position for Carter. But last night, we finally saw what happens when the Bulls are in a semi-competitive game and Wendell Carter isn't sitting on the bench with 3 fouls in the first quarter. And he played 30 minutes, lost about 2 minutes to what eventually turned into a blowout in the fourth quarter. So I think that we can continue projecting, at least for tournament's sake, and trying to get to his potential, 32 minutes from him. I think that's about where we should expect him to play in games that are close and where he's not in foul trouble. Obviously, the Bulls get blown out a lot and he gets in foul trouble a lot, which makes him a really volatile player. But that also is factored into his price tag. If you were just pricing Wendell Carter Jr. for games where it's not a blowout and he's not in foul trouble, he'd be a hell of a lot more expensive than he is. So I think that gives him value in tournaments, since he's just been a very productive player this year when he's on the floor. He's averaging over a fantasy point per minute, has a usage rate of about 22%, rebounding and assist percentages between 14 and 15%. So he's contributing everywhere. It's just a matter of staying on the floor. And there's been some growing pains in terms of his fouls. So that's the risk you're taking with him. But, just as far as upside goes, I think he's pretty clearly underpriced.
All right. And for those of you that are listening in, let's talk about his fouls here in actual raw numbers. This is his last half dozen games. Only had 4 last night against Detroit, and that's the fewest he's had. Otherwise, he fouled out against Milwaukee, 5 against San Antonio, 5 against Minnesota, fouled out against Miami in just 13 minutes, and then had 5 there in 21 minutes going against DeAndre Ayton and the Suns. That is some definite risk, and that's one of the things that sometimes we say, "Oh yeah, there's foul trouble." For him, there really is. He's constantly flirting with fouling out. It is hard for most players to foul out of an NBA game, particularly this consistently. So that's something you do want to keep in the back of your mind, that there is risk. I mean, if we talked about someone like Hassan Whiteside, sometimes he has foul troubles. Sometimes he goes 3 games and has 5 fouls across those 3 games. So he's one of those guys that, your mileage may vary. Wendell Carter Jr., however, we know where the mileage is. It's going to be a bumpy road, Adam, but if we have good shocks, I'm not even going to go there. Whatever. I've got the screen up. I was just trying to see if I could get that glazed look off of your face and just get the "what the hell is Emac saying" face. So there we are. Looking at the rest of the Bulls here, we do have a very elevated price point now, which, by the way, is fair because we have been living in the mid to upper 7Ks for Zach Attack here. He is finally getting up there. He's cresting over the $8,000 mark there on DraftKings. He is at 8,200. We do have him again eligible for both guard positions here. Someone who's intriguing tonight. Now, we have not seen quite the same, Chris Paul defense, same kind of any defense actually from Houston. What are your thoughts here if you're going to be spending? Because it's just he's a stone's throw away from those other half dozen top end options for about another 15% of price.
Right. I mean, I always like LaVine. I think he clearly has a really high ceiling just because of how involved he is in this offense. But he is also an inefficient shooter, and it's not someone you can project to go out there and make a bunch of his shots any given night. The problem here for me is that there is a pretty strong upper mid range here of guys in his price tag, and there are cheaper guys on the Bulls that I like. Paying for LaVine I think is fine, but since they started running out the starting lineup with LaVine, Jabari Parker, and Ryan Arcidiacono, Jabari Parker is averaging just about the same points per minute as LaVine. He's playing very similar minutes, maybe a couple minutes less per night, but he's like $1,400 cheaper on DraftKings. So I would just rather go to Jabari Parker between the two of them. You have Parker with the second highest usage rate on the team over that span, only behind LaVine. The second highest assist percentage behind LaVine, and the second highest rebounding percentage behind Wendell Carter. So he's still been incredibly productive. He's finally it's finally resulting in good fantasy games as well after a stretch of really inconsistent performances. It's just hard for me to get to LaVine at a higher price point than Jabari Parker.
Okay. I like that, actually. I like that because I've got a couple discounted guards that I'm going to be looking at in one of our later games here. So if I'm not going to be spending here, I do like your Jabari Parker call out on that. Anything else you would like to mention here for the Chicago side of things? We have Justin Holiday, who has suddenly decided he's going to rebound and make his shots, which I think he's had 2 of his 3 career best rebounding games in the last week, which is impressive, including he had a near career high in the first half for rebounds a couple games ago. Adam, that's kind of weird. I don't think the old dog, get it? UW Dogs, Huskies. I don't think the old dog's going to learn that many new tricks. Is he someone that you would consider on our 6-game slate this evening?
He's fine. If he ends up in lineups, I'm not upset about it. Just because assuming the game stays close, you should get around 38 minutes out of him. And the price tag is still cheap enough where he doesn't have to be that productive on a per minute basis to pay it off. I don't buy into this, resurgence of him just consistently putting up 30+ fantasy point games. It's been pretty consistently, one thing or another, whether it's a career high rebounding game or him making, shooting 60% from 3. Last night he ran into 4 stocks, which he has done a pretty good job of racking up steals lately. But the flips, he's not a high usage guy. And so there's going to be duds mixed in there. But the flip side of that is he's playing so many minutes that he has as good a chance as anyone of any given night, running into some stat category that he outperforms his averages at. And it's, obviously not a bad matchup. So I'm not excited about getting to Justin Holiday, but I have no issue with him either. Pretty much the exact same way that I feel about Ryan Arcidiacono on DraftKings as well, where he's still really inexpensive for a guy that projects to play 34 to 36 minutes. He's not exciting at all. He's a low usage guy. He gets a little bit more usage when his shot's actually falling. But, since being inserted into the starting lineup, has a 12% usage rate, has averaged 2/3 of a fantasy point per minute, but plays 34 to 36 minutes at, like a $4,500 price tag. So he can certainly run into enough stats to be useful.
Did you honestly think he had a 46 fantasy point game in his bag?
No.
That was one for the ages, shall we say, on the strength of the 5 steals 2 games ago against Milwaukee, dropping his shots, 22 points. That was actually back-to-back games for him to have 22 NBA points. But yeah, that is something that we probably are not going to see very often.
Yeah, I mean, that's just kind of the point. Like he's too inexpensive for the minutes he plays. He's not too inexpensive for his per minute production. But when you're playing that many minutes, it just gives you a better chance of running into a ceiling game. The flip side, though, is that he also just is not that productive. So there's a really low floor.
All right, as we finish up Chicago, I'm assuming no interest whatsoever in Campaign or Shaq Harrison or the whack-a-mole that is the third point guard.
No.
Chicago, goodbye. You are in the rear view mirror. Houston, hello. What's going on? We've got James Harden, a tick shy of $12,000 on DraftKings. That would be the, Chris Paul hasn't played in a while price. Chris Paul, we think he's going to play tonight. This will be a back-to-back. He missed quite a few games there with, first a personal issue and then a variety of maladies. So he sat out 3 games. Harden was absolutely phenomenal in those games. I suspect Paul will play tonight, but who knows? This could be one of the ones where like, okay, we finally got you back. We're favored by a dozen. We are at home. Harden and crew, take us all the way here. So let's talk about this as if Chris Paul will play, because we already know what to do if he's not going to play. If he's not going to play, then you get in Capella, you get in Harden, and you just kick back and enjoy. Chris Paul is going to play in our scenario. He's going to play 30 minutes. What do you want to do?
Clint Capella, regardless, Paul in or out, just an absolutely great spot, I think, for Capella here. The Bulls, as you mentioned at the top of this game, not one of the faster teams in the league, kind of play in the middle of the pack in pace, yet they still are allowing the most rebounds per game to opponents. They're allowing the 6th most offensive rebounds per game. And Capella's price tag is still, pretty appealing for a guy who's going to play in competitive games around 36 minutes. I think it's just a great spot for Capella. Absolutely love him here. James Harden, obviously, if Paul's out, becomes the top player on the slate. If Paul's in, then I don't really want to pay the current price tag for James Harden. We've still seen his usage trending up even with Paul in since they got rid of Carmelo. Even before his Paul injury, he had about a 40% usage rate since Carmelo's departure. So there's still some upside there. It's just that on a 6-game slate where there probably isn't going to be a ton of great, really cheap value, and there is a pretty strong mid-range, I don't really want to pay a premium for Harden with Chris Paul.
All right. For those of you that play over there on Draft, the Draft app, if you are going, don't sleep on getting James Harden. Remember, there it's raw points and it's all about position scarcity. So you want to keep an eye on the replacement level. There are a decent number of centers there today. I did a couple of the drafts last night. There's a decent number of centers, so you don't have to jump on those right away. But don't just say, "Oh, Chris Paul's back. I don't want to play James Harden." You have to reshift your focus and your perspective when you're looking at that. Looking at new hypothetical, Adam. If, let's assume they're both on the court at the same time, Wendell Carter Jr. and Marquise Chris, who fouls out first?
What?
Marquise Chris, Wendell Carter Jr., 2 of the most prolific foul people in the world. Who fouls out faster? It's got to be Chris,
Carter,
right?
because I think he plays minutes.
Okay, all right. I'm just keeping this going. We got a lot of basketball to talk about. Got to spice things up every now and then. Can't let you get settled here or in a rut. Looking at the other guys, I mentioned Marquise Chris because I was surprised that he had played. He's actually played the last 3 games. We're not going to play him. He's just as likely to get a DNP CD. But we do have Eric Gordon. We've got James Ennis, Daniel House unique points for the spelling of his name. Not so many fantasy points. I don't really like him. What do you got here? Tucker, Ennis, Clark, Green. Any of those guys? Pick one of them who's starting. We're
I
we're
mean,
in the dregs.
Tucker and Ennis are the two that should play the most minutes. They generally don't do anything with those minutes, so I'm not really interested in them. But if I have to pick out of that group, I would take either of them.
All right, let's get on here to our next game. We've got 3 to go. We have the Boston Celtics at Minnesota. Boston, of course, on the back-to-back. Al Horford sat out Friday night for rest. He is expected to play. Minnesota was one of the handful of teams that did not play last night, so they should be a little fresher than most. Starting off with Boston, what do we want to do here with Al Horford? Let me just double check. It looks like he does still have. Oh, they removed it last night when I was making my lineups. He did have the red Q or the red out tag next to his name. Now you have to actually click on his player profile to see it. 6,400. So he's up about 10% from where he was over the last week. He does have the ability to get into the 35-40 fantasy point range. We know that he matches up okay against Karl Anthony Towns from a fantasy point getting perspective. What do you got here for Horford? Thankfully, he is also power forward eligible for us.
Yeah, I mean, a decent price tag for Horford, not particularly exciting, not really like too expensive either. So kind of just a spot where if I get to him, I get to him. You know, he contributes in multiple categories, but it's pretty unusual for him to have a true ceiling game either. So as a last guy in, if I get there, then that's fine. I think I would rather get to Tatum in that price range if I can, or just go somewhere else like Jabari Parker. I'd rather play at a similar price point as well. So yeah, kind of just like a mediocre spot there for him. I mean, when this team's healthy, outside of Kyrie, it just kind of is like a coin flip for me who gets there from Boston, outside of Kyrie, who we know is going to get monster usage night in and night out and has a nice matchup here. Beyond that, though, it's just, everyone plays like similar minutes. Everyone is similarly productive on a permanent basis. So it's tough to prioritize any of them other than Irving.
It's almost like their coach is really, really good and puts everybody in spots that are tailored to their skill set. What do you know?
Yeah, something like that.
Jaylen Brown, questionable. He does have a bruised tailbone, so something to keep in mind there. Just for fun, I was curious. Now, this is no indicator, but it is nice to see. Looking at Horford, the last 4 times he has played Karl Anthony Towns. Now, this does stretch back to the beginning of 2 seasons ago because they only play 2 times per year. So the last 4 times both of them have taken the court against each other in the regular season. 44, 45, 28, and 40 DraftKings points. It's nice to see. It's nice to see. But as we mentioned, when Boston has their full complement of players, can be a little tricky to know what's going to happen. I just wanted to see here who was the. Why am I blanking on this? Oh, it was Smart that started. He started for Brown. Any interest in? Let's say Brown's out. We know Horford's going to be back in. There's really nothing to find here from Boston, is there?
If Brown's out and Horford's back in, I expect Hayward to get the start. That's what they did last time that happened. You would still get more minutes from Marcus Smart, so I still think that he would be a fine value play, especially because if he's coming off the bench, it does lower his ownership. You would have people less likely to chase last night's game log. So I think that Smart would still be a perfectly fine value option. You just have to keep in mind what you're getting with Marcus Smart. And it's a guy who, averages around 0.8 fantasy points per minute. He is very volatile in terms of he's not a very good shooter, and he has to pick up some defensive stats or have a hot night shooting to really have a good game. But the price tag's still appealing if Jaylen's out.
All right. Let's talk about Minnesota here. Karl Anthony Towns, as he's given us moments of being good without one Jimmy Butler. However, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, last 8 games, he has only topped 40 fantasy points 3 times. I say only because at his current price point, touching 5 figures, that is very, very disappointing. Now, he does have a nice little 74 burger in there against Chicago and the aforementioned Wendell Carter Jr. What do you want to do tonight with Towns? He's 9,200. He's right there with Drummond. He's right there with Griffin. Rank him against those guys because that's kind of our direct changes at this, or direct pivots at the similar positions.
I think really, really similar to Drummond. Not a real strong preference between the two of them. I think the Towns probably plays a couple of more minutes. Drummond, I would probably trust a little bit more. So really close between them. I think I like them both better than Blake. I'm not concerned about Towns' recent game logs because if you go and look, like, yeah, he's been disappointing, but against San Antonio, like if you look on a per minute basis, it's not as bad. Against San Antonio in the last game, 43 fantasy points in 28 minutes. Played 28 minutes because the Timberwolves won by like 40 points. So he didn't get run in the fourth quarter. Disappointing game against Cleveland. Kind of a tough matchup there against Tristan Thompson. Whatever. Not a good game. 74 fantasy points against Chicago in a great matchup. Played 28 minutes against Brooklyn, 5 fouls in that game. Played 28 minutes against Denver, 4 fouls in that game. Tough matchup with Marc Gasol. Disappointing game against Portland. But it's just been a lot of stuff mixed in along with, kind of underperforming. Since the Butler trade, still up near a 28% usage rate, 27.7% usage rate for Towns, averaging about 1.3 fantasy points per minute, and in competitive games playing 38 minutes a night. So I'm just not concerned about his recent games, and he has had some success in this matchup as well. I don't really care all that much about going back to look at different matchups, but against a team like Boston, who we know overall defensively is good, but they can struggle with quality bigs, it's kind of worth looking at, I think. And, keeping in mind that he was playing with Jimmy Butler in some of these games, but in 6 matchups since the start of the 2015 season against Boston, he's gone over 54 fantasy points in 4 out of those 6, 61 last season, 60 the season before that. So like he's gotten it done in, this spot before. I'm just not concerned about him.
All right. Moving to the front court here. Well, I don't know. Well, it depends what you think about Robert Covington. Position-wise, he's a tweener. Hell of a last couple games there. He has become the new guy that's going to get all the minutes in the world here with Tom Thibodeau. He has put up 24 and 21 NBA points in his last 2 games. He has got some nice crooked numbers there across the rest of the box score. He's hit 39 and 44 fantasy points respective there. I actually do like this matchup for him because of the current makeup of Boston. There's going to be plenty of guys that he can guard. So I like his chances to get a couple steals, blocks combined. Thoughts here on Rocco?
The minutes are nice. I'm just not sure that I want to go to that price point in just a game. Like he has guys to defend for sure, and the minutes just aren't in question. But I'm still just concerns about how productive he'll be on a permanent basis. Averaging 0.9 fantasy points per minute since joining the team, which is pretty nice. But the price tag is just to a point where there's more risk than reward, I think, in going to Covington here.
All right, I'm following along here with chat there. There's some good points here. So ex Cossack is saying that Boston coach could be, and I don't disagree with any of this. So these are not personal attacks, but I'll give you a few name shout outs here. But ex Cossack is saying it's overrating the Boston coach. How does he not have any rings yet? I'm sort of paraphrasing here. And then they're saying, well, he's young. He's come along. Eric freaking Spoelstra has rings. There's your answer right there. LeBron. Yeah. LeBron is in the way, or was in the way, for Boston. I mean, come on. They took that patchwork team deep into the playoffs last year that had no business being there. That's pretty impressive, what they've done. But and Spoelstra's a reasonably good coach, but he had LeBron, he had Wade, he had Bosch, etc. So a lot of this comes down to the players. But what you want to do, how I like to judge coaches, is I like to see what are they doing with a mediocre team. or even a bad team. How can they handle it? So what's going on in Sacramento this year? Pretty good from a coaching perspective. Watching RIP Flip Saunders dealing with the variety of chuckleheads that he had to in his various coaching stops. He was actually a pretty good coach, even though those guys didn't get the titles. So just throwing that out there.
I think we all can agree Scott Brooks sucks.
Yes. Brooks, Grunfeld, 2020. Let's get them into office so we can get them out of the front office for the Wizards, Adam.
Anything to get rid of them.
They can't be any worse. Winding up here with the backcourt, Derrick Rose, arguably in the sixth man of the year contention as we are heading into the first third or wrapping up the first third of the season. We have, Jeff Teague. I'm not really excited about either of these guys.
And I mean, it's tough to really love anything on Minnesota outside of Towns. Obviously it's a tough matchup, but also you just have kind of not great minutes. Like Teague's getting his, and the price tag's okay, but it's just not a super appealing matchup. Rose is, back playing 28 to 30 minutes now that the team's healthy. Wiggins' minutes have come down because Rose needs to get his and Rocco is going to get his minutes. So there's upside for Wiggins at 5,400, but certainly not something that I want to prioritize. Not a whole lot here for me outside of Karl Anthony Towns.
All right, let's get on here to our next game. We have Toronto and Cleveland, which gives me a moment I'm going to drop this in chat. This is the second best contest on DraftKings. We have to say their NFL listener league that they just got rake free 10,000 people, $5 3-entry max. So shout out to the DFS Edge guys for getting that one up there. I like to listen to their podcast from time to time. It's okay. We're at Awesome. We can say we listen to some of the other people, but Smith, CSU Ram, Adam Love 10, got to meet each of those guys multiple times. So great trio of guys there. But the second best contest, Adam, would be the Fred Van Elite Fan Club. So here are the rules. I have to play Fred Van, not so elite. You guys don't have to. I dropped the link in the chat. It's $1. It's a 20-man league. It'll resize if it doesn't fill. No pressure, but this is iteration 24. I did cash in the last one with 4.5 points from Fred Van Elite. Adam, I was 14 points away from winning it. When I win with him in my lineup, we are doing away with this contest, but I have cashed in 3 or 4 of the 20 plus that we've done thus far. So I'm paying the rake for you, gamers, tonight. So jump on in there. Maybe Adam will grace us with his presence. But it's a lot of fun. Plus, then you can make fun of me on Twitter as well. I'll post that out there on my Twitter timeline for those of you listening to this later. It usually fills up within a couple hours. But it's a fun one. And again, I get to play Fred Van, not so elite. I watched him against the Wizards. He's not good, Adam. He's not good. Is he one of the best players in the world? Yes, because he's in the NBA. Is he a good NBA player? Sadly, no. There's a reason he was an undrafted free agent. Talk to me here about Toronto. They should be at their full complement of players. They're playing at the 11th fastest pace. We know that Cleveland is, stumbling along, I guess is a good way of saying it. But what do you got here from the Toronto backcourt in particular, since that's where the fantasy goodness generally starts with them? They are 14-point, that went up a tick. They are 14-point road favorites in Cleveland.
Not a ton here. I don't like Lowry much when Kawhi plays. You just see a big decrease in his per minute production. His usage falls down to about 17.5, 18%. And his price tag is just always kind of elevated because he's Kyle Lowry. So I have trouble getting to him whenever Kawhi's in. I don't have a problem going to Leonard, especially on FanDuel again, where similar to Kevin Durant, like you have to roster small forwards. So there's less opportunity cost to going to Kawhi than there is on DraftKings, where you're paying, you have to really factor in that you're paying like $400 more for Kawhi than for Karl Anthony Towns, for example, or $200 more than for Andre Drummond. It's a much bigger issue on DraftKings than it is FanDuel. So more of a FanDuel play for me. As far as DraftKings tournaments, it's a tough matchup in particular against the Cleveland frontcourt with Tristan Thompson, but Valanciunas at 4,800, I think offers upside, assuming he gets the start here, simply because he's just such a strong per minute producer when he's on the floor. He comes with a ton of risk, obviously, but Just a pretty appealing price tag there. That would be my favorite spot to go to on DraftKings.
What do you think about Pascal Siakam? It's like he is a young Sergei Ibaka. Is that where we want to go with this? He's been actually productive. He's bounces between the 3, 4, and 5 as things tend to go smaller. He's been getting a ton of run. Offensive game that completely caught me off guard. More than just he actually has moments where he is a scorer, not just a in the flow of the game garbage man, as I like to call him. And no slight intended there, because I always thought the same of Dennis Rodman, and he's in the Hall of Fame. So, but it's getting ahead of ourselves there. But what do you think about Siakam at 6,200? That's getting up there.
Yeah, I mean, I've been really impressed with him this year. I think he's really good, and as you mentioned, he contributes across the board, which is really nice. The price tag isn't overly appealing to me. Like that would be my only issue with him. He's averaging when Kawhi's on the floor this year, and he's another one who benefits when Kawhi's out. But with Kawhi on the floor, he's averaging 0.93 fantasy points per minute. Should play probably around 32 minutes here. That makes him a decent but not great play at that price point. It's not a bad spot, obviously, but yeah, if I got Siakam, it would be fine. But like, I would still rather get to Jabari Parker for like $600 more.
All right. Anything else here from T Dot?
No.
Right.
Well, from Toronto or from the game?
From Toronto. We're gonna get to Cleveland here.
No,
because we kind of hit on it. You and I have had some good how the hell is he doing this conversations off air with regards to Tristan Thompson. Holy hell, this is, I mean, in his last 7 games, he's only scored less than 30 fantasy points twice. Wow. And most of these are in the mid to upper 30s, and he's doing it point per minute. It's the scoring that is coming out of nowhere. He was always a guy that you were kind of like, hey, he might get a double-double, and he would end up with 10 points and 8 boards, or 8 points and 10 boards. Dude, he is just absolutely crushing it. He's got double-doubles in 5 of his last 6. You get the bonus there on DraftKings for that. The points are what's really setting him apart. He had 13 in his last game, just played 28 minutes. 4 against Steven Adams. You know what? I'm going to give him a pass on that one. And the team was kind of out of it. He did play 35 minutes. But he's got a string here of 16, 16, 18, 14, 10, 9, 11, 22, 10, 19. Adam, I actually am actively looking to put him in my lineups tonight. Give me a cold bucket of reality here, or validate this.
I mean, I just think the price tag's still appealing. Like, he's playing huge minutes. He's obviously rebounding really well, which is the big thing. But also scoring more, like you said. I think the matchup's difficult in that Toronto this season is allowing the 9th fewest rebounds per game. They're allowing the 3rd fewest offensive rebounds per game, and a lot of Thompson's offense still comes on putbacks. Getting rebounds and being right at the rim. So I think that's concerning, but. If he's going to play 36 to 38 minutes, if we assume the game stays competitive, which, obviously is a big assumption, but if he's going to play that many minutes at, a $5,800 price tag on DraftKings, then I still think he clearly has upside. If it also depends on the health of Cleveland. Like, if David Nwaba's back, I have trouble expecting Thompson to play that many minutes, because you would have Larry Nance shifting back to the backup center position, which means that Nance is probably getting like 16 minutes at center, which means Thompson's only getting probably like 32, even if you take a couple off of Nance, maybe 34. So I think the health of Nwaba does have a trickle-down effect on Thompson as well.
All right, because they've got their questionable guys. You had George Hill, the questionable at the shoulder. Nwaba may return with his bulky knee. Sam Decker. They, of course, don't have, well, they have J.R. Smith, but they don't have him, if you know what I mean. No more Kyle Korver waving a towel from the bench. Alec Burks unleashed, Adam, if we can call it that, in his last game. He 26 minutes was just chucking away and had 6 rebounds. That's probably close to a career high. for him, but 4 assists, a couple steals there. The bench crew here, or let's say the I don't want to say the bench crew, but because we got to put Sexton in there. But what do you like here with their backcourt between Sexton, Clarkson, Burks? We've got Harrison is mucking things up with the minutes. If as you mentioned, if Nawab comes back, that kind of pushes some stuff down here. What are you thinking here for some of the value priced guys here?
Yeah, I mean, all depends on who's active for this team. If Hill, Nwaba, Decker, if these guys are all out and we're getting the same Cleveland team that we have been, then Larry Nance is still going to play a ton of minutes. As we talked about yesterday, Lofty and I on the Deeper Dive show, he's not as productive alongside Thompson, and that's to be expected for a guy who doesn't create a lot of his own offense. He relies on rebounds and putbacks and everything. So his per minute production takes a big hit alongside Thompson, but the minutes are still there, which is nice on a 6-game slate. If those guys are back, obviously his minutes take a pretty big downturn. Same goes for Cedi Osman, who is not productive on a per minute basis, but if he's going to be forced into mid-30s in playing time at a sub 5K price tag, he becomes appealing. Colin Sexton, I think, is pretty much locked into his minutes regardless. I think maybe if Hill's back, you probably get like 32 to 34 instead of 36 to 38. But, still would have some upside there. Still a really tough matchup, though. I'm not putting too much stock into what Alec Burks did yesterday. He played the final 16 minutes of that game in a blowout. In the first half, he only played about 9 minutes. So I'm pretty comfortable projecting him for like 16 to 18 minutes here if we're assuming the game stays close. If you're projecting, blowouts from this game, then obviously give Burks more minutes. But outside of Tristan Thompson, if everyone's out, it's just not a spot where I really want to go to this Cleveland team too heavily.
All right, fair enough there. We've got a bunch of shows coming up here for the remainder of the weekend on Osmo.com. We have coming up later this afternoon, we do have the Alex Baker himself, the man behind the curtain, will be stepping out and doing the On the Contrary show with Chris Baggs and some guy named Evan Silva. I don't know. Maybe you guys have heard of him. Oh, of course you've heard of him. He's one of the best DFS fantasy football minds out there. He's got one of the best articles that come out each week there, and we will get him after he's had all week to prepare. This is right before everybody's going to be setting lineups later this afternoon, and you will get the thoughts and download from both Alex Osmo Baker and Evan Silva. So that is something to watch. That'll probably be right around lunchtime, or a little bit after lunchtime, probably about 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock for that show. We also have Fast Eddie Fear will be on live before lock this evening, and then tomorrow at 11, starting at 11, we have Lofty D, that's Dave Lochran, and Ben Jazraz Rasa will be doing their NFL show, and then Spags and the one and only Josh Engelman will take you up to lock for the NFL. And if you ask real nice on Twitter, I bet you guys can convince Fast Eddie to do a Sunday a Sunday NBA solo show. So chase him down. All you got to do is just whisper sweet nothings and say nice things to him, and he'll probably do a show for you guys. But that's what we've got coming in here. We also launched a new show on Friday. We're dabbling with, there's this thing called sports wagering, Adam, that's becoming quite popular and becoming allowable in multiple states. So that's we did a little show talking about college football and pro football. That was myself and Ben yesterday. For those of you guys that don't know, Ben actually, before he got into DFS, his job, I'm going to say this, his job, I use air quotes because we're all jealous, but yeah, he wagers on college basketball, football, and pro football. That's what he does, because you know what? He is a degenerate, and he's very, very good at it. So he is someone that we will be leveraging more and more. He and Andrew Barron, who of course do the A to B show around lunchtime most Monday through Friday, kind of our variety show, because they'll cover football, they'll cover basketball, they'll cover the single game slates. Of course, they cover PGA. Both those guys rake it in with PGA, but they also Andrew does some wagering as well. So they've got a couple static videos series that they're putting out. You can find those on the Osmo YouTube channel, where they're talking about the different things you can do in betting. We talked about teasers on the show yesterday, parlays. They did a nice little 7-minute clip talking about how to understand and utilize reverse line movement, not only how to understand what it means and how it works for sports wagering, but also how you can utilize that with regards to potentially plays being overlooked in DFS or teams in situations that may not be getting their full due and proper. So that is something out there that you guys will want to check out. But again, later this afternoon, you will get the On the Contrary with Alex Osmo Baker and Evan Silva. Okay, we did the shilling there, Adam. You know I live for that, right? My whole family was in sales. I'm the one person that's not in sales. You would think I am. I was the numbers guy. But anyway. Anything else from this game before we hit our nightcap?
No.
All right. We have the Battle of the Bogdanoviches. We have Indiana at Sacramento. 225 over under. Indiana is favored by 1 and a hook on the road. So this one should be a little bit of a barn burner. We have Marvin Bagley Jr. questionable. He has back spasms in practice the other day. So he will be a game time decision. Here's the thing. If he goes through shoot around today, which we should have that information before lock, he will probably play, is my guess. If he misses shoot around, then he will be a true game time decision, and I would lean towards just not worth the headache. Now, the one good thing about DraftKings is you can set it up nicely for late swap. Now, FanDuel, it's the lock, so you're going to want to do something differently. But if you leave yourself a little wiggle room, if you will, you could, if you save $400, you can get yourself over to Willie Cauley-Stein if Bagley is out and you utilize your positions appropriately, or you can look to like a Miles Turner or one of these other guys. So you will have outs, but that's just something you want to be cognizant of. The other guy that's dinged up a little bit is Domantas Sabonis with his perpetually sore back. Here is another guy, Adam. Let's start off with him. Phenomenal. He is coming off the bench. He has just embraced this role, and he is outproducing the majority of his teammates from a fantasy perspective. We have Victor Oladipo out indefinitely with his bum knee. So Sabonis picking up the scoring load there with the second unit, in addition to just racking in the rebounds. Just a quick look here. 20 and 15, 21 and 16, 13 and 10. Okay, well, that was against Rudy Gobert and Derek Favors. All right, we'll give you that one. 19 and 16. Those are some serious numbers here. Is he going to be a big part of your plans this evening?
Yeah, absolutely. He's questionable for the game, so obviously that's the concern. But I absolutely love this spot for him for a couple of reasons. One, it's obviously a huge pace-up game for Indiana. And he's just incredibly productive without Oladipo on the floor. Since Oladipo's injury, he's averaging 1.5 fantasy points per minute. He has a 24.7% usage rate, but also 26.3% rebounding percentage, 29% assist percentage. So doing everything when he's on the floor. The only issue has been that he's sharing minutes with Miles Turner, and it's tough for him to really play a ton of minutes in any individual game. But this is actually a spot where I would expect him to play a lot, even with Turner out there, because we know that Indiana is willing to play them alongside each other for stretches, Turner and Sabonis. And this is a Kings team that has a really big front court. They play Willie Cauley-Stein alongside Marvin Bagley for stretches. Harry Giles, when he's playing backup 5, will play alongside Bagley. So it's a spot where the Pacers can really easily match up by playing Turner alongside Sabonis, which makes it more likely that you get, like a 28. You have the potential for a 28 to 30 minute Sabonis game instead of him having to really get there in like 24 minutes. So if he's in, I absolutely love Sabonis. One of my favorite plays on the slate.
All right. Slack is saying Tyreek Evans, Tyreek Evans, Tyreek Evans. Hey, so are we all. It appears that they do not want to play him more than, 20 to 25 minutes, which is really doing a number on his fantasy production. Now, the shot attempts have sort of been there. He's been low double digits pretty much every game that Victor Oladipo has been out, but just really not much else. We can always count on him for a steal or two a game because he's pretty active in the passing lanes, but just, his scoring has just been nowhere near what we've come to expect in stops at New Orleans, when he was with Memphis, 2 stints with Sacramento. Hey, where's this game again tonight? Oh, that's right, Sacramento revenge. Not really, but what do you got here? I just can't bring myself to do it. And I did play because Lofty said he was not going to play him, and that's when you are in the quote touting business and you say this, I'm never again. That's when your guy breaks out for 40 fantasy points. I tried to tail that and it didn't work. So for me, never again, at least not tonight for Tyreek Evans. What are you doing with the former Sacramento?
Yeah, so counterpoints on Tyreek Evans here. So the minutes obviously haven't been there. We've seen a couple of games where he does it. His fourth quarter run, he gets up to about 28 minutes, which at his current price tag is fine. But I think that you also have to keep in mind that we've seen Indiana play hot hand with their backcourt all season long, regardless really of even when Oladipo's healthy. Sometimes we were seeing Joseph close, sometimes we were seeing Collison, sometimes, whatever. They've just run a bunch of different rotations to close out games. They haven't been consistent. And so it would make sense that if Evans isn't playing well, he's less likely to get these fourth quarter minutes, but that's not indicative of what we would expect in a game where he is playing well, which is obviously what we're hoping happens if he's in our lineup. So that goes to my second point of for the season, Tyreek Evans has a 48% true shooting percentage. Last season, he was at 56%. So he's shooting worse this season than he was last year. But since Oladipo went out, his true shooting percentage is 40%. So he's 8 percentage points lower than his season average, which means that he should start making more shots, even if we take that as the new norm. If we assume that his career numbers or his numbers last season are the norm, then he has a ton of improvement coming. And most players shoot less when they're not shooting well, or at least a lot of players. And so if Evans were actually like making his shots, he probably shoots more than like 10 times a game. Like he's still, got a 25% usage rate. Granted, part of that's from turnovers, but I just think that he's basically playing to his absolute floor here, but he still has a ceiling. It's a huge pace-up spot against Sacramento. His price is down because of how poorly he's been playing, and people aren't going to roster him, as evidenced by the discussion that we're having right now and the fact that people in chat are completely off of him. It's not saying that he's a lock to have a good game here, but it's certainly a nice matchup, and he still has the opportunity. We're just seeing him play really, really poorly. But unless we think he's hurt or aged like 8 years during the offseason, there's no reason to think that he just absolutely sucks for the rest of the season. So I'll gladly go right back to Evans in tournaments tonight.
Yeah. The guy I'm intrigued by, and you mentioned the hot hand approach. So for a while, I was content to roll with the youngest Holiday brother, Aaron, but not really looking to him tonight. Corey Joseph is probably going to be the guy for me. 4,400. We do have Darren Collison, who a little more stable, but also a little more expensive. Similar upside or potential, in my opinion, and the way my lineup is being constructed, I do have Joseph in there for the time being. Do you like one of this duo better than the other between Collison and Joseph?
Not really. I mean, Joseph's price tag's more appealing, and it is not that his minutes aren't really tied to Collison without Oladipo. We're seeing Joseph kind of get his minutes regardless, and then Collison and Holiday are splitting the minutes at point guard. Both of them averaging between 0.8 and 0.9 fantasy points per minute. Obviously, a appealing spot for both of them. So where Joseph's significantly cheaper, I would prefer him. Where they're similarly priced, I would try and get the Collison if I can. But I think that they're both perfectly fine plays here.
All right, lest we forget, hey, Collison, this is like a thank you game. Thank you, I'm not playing for the Kings anymore. As we finish up here on the Pacers, I'm not seeing anybody else. So looking over to...
You're not on Bogdanovich anymore?
I'm on the other Bogdanovich.
Okay.
I'm on the Kings Bogdanovich. I've swapped. Now they're essentially, and thank you, they're essentially the same price. I'm going with. I will end up having both of them in lineups just because when you use the fantasy cruncher and you set a little randomness and guys are about the same salary, it'll feather back and forth between who's in my lineups. But if I'm cognizant of what I'm doing, and for those of you in the Fred Van Elite fan club, there will be Corey Joseph and there will be the Bogdanovich for the Kings. That's where I'm leaning. He is my second favorite play from the Kings. My first, and my first is either going to be Willie Cauley-Stein or Bagley. If we see Bagley go through shoot around, then I think he's going to play. Then I will say Bagley's the guy I want going against the Kings front court. If he's doesn't miss a shoot around or whatever, I'll be building or looking to Willie Cauley-Stein. What are your thoughts here? Let's start with the front court and assume that Bagley plays. What do you want to do with that situation?
Then I would like Bagley and I would like Cauley-Stein. I don't think
both of them then.
Yeah, I don't think that Bagley has a huge impact on Cauley-Stein because Cauley-Stein gets his minutes. Bagley gets essentially the way they're running their rotation is they're getting Bagley his 28 to 30 minutes a night or whatever. But sometimes it's at the expense of Bjelica. Some of it's always at the expense of Bjelica, but sometimes more of it's at the expense of Bjelica. Sometimes it's Bagley playing backup center over Harry Giles, which we saw a lot of that against the Clippers in Sacramento's last game. But you're still getting Cauley-Stein getting his 32 to 34 minutes whenever he's not in foul trouble. That's obviously a whole different issue, but when he's not in foul trouble, you're still getting his. So it's just a matter of who Bagley's taking minutes from between Bjelica and Harry Giles primarily. So I don't think that Bagley playing really impacts Cauley-Stein that much for me. I still think Cauley-Stein's underpriced. One of the higher per minute producers on this team for the season, a little over a fantasy point per minute, $6,000 on DraftKings where you can roster multiple centers. If he's going to play 32 to 34 minutes, you don't need him to exceed his average production by that much for him to be a good play. Bagley, if he's in, I think is still a good play as well, just because he's clearly getting his minutes. He's still very reasonably priced, and he's a high per minute guy as well.
All right. In the battle of the Bogdanoviches, I have declared that I will be looking towards the Kings version. I have played the Pacers version a fair amount because I did like his price point. It's now cresting over $5K. But he was, I think he still is a decent play on this West Coast swing as they finish up for the Pacers, going there without Oladipo. I still like Indiana's Bogdanovich better than Tyreek Evans, but between the two of these, I'm leaning towards the Kings version this evening. What do you got here? Because the Kings version, man, he had a 26 career high 26 points a couple games ago. That was pretty cool.
Yeah. One other thing I did want to mention on Cauley-Stein, I like the price tag. It is a tough matchup as far as rebounds go. He's another guy that you really need to be getting, a lot of boards. And Indiana's allowed the fourth fewest rebounds per game. They've allowed the fourth fewest offensive rebounds per game. So not a great matchup, but just more of a tournament play where I think the price is lower than his ceiling and the ownership really hasn't been there lately. So I just kind of wanted to add on to that it's not a great matchup. But I do like Bogdan Bogdanović. Like the minutes have been there, whether he's starting or coming off the bench, taking minutes away from, the Justin Jackson, Troy Williams types, also eating into Iman Shumpert a bit, at times taking minutes from Buddy Hield, but, getting his 30 to, low 30s minutes. And he produces everywhere. He can score, but also he's a good facilitator. He makes good passes. He picks up assists. He can rebound a bit. So I think that, the price tag's pretty reasonable on him as well. The one thing to keep in mind is that this Indiana team does play very, very slow. One of the slower teams in the league. They have been very good defensively this season, though the starting unit is not as good defensively without Oladipo as we would expect. But it is a pretty huge pace down spot for the Kings.
Yeah, Kings are checking in at number 2 on the season, and Indiana is the 4th lowest. So definitely going to be running in some quicksand there. I see some people in chat talking about game selection, good scores. Just throwing it out there. The boosters, those are fun games. You get 10, 20, 50x of your buy-in, and you don't have to. Yes, if you win the whole thing, you're going to be mad that your upside was capped. But if you just quote min cash it, it's 5 times better than anything else you're going to get in tournaments. So you want to look at different payout structures. I really like triple ups and quintuple ups, particularly in basketball. Now in DraftKings, it's not, you don't have to beat 1 in 5. I think they pay out based on where the rake is. You get 5 times your buy-in, but I think they pay out, like, depending on the size of the contest, 17.8% or something along those lines. But I have been having some success in those. And don't worry about buy-in levels. I mean, if you go on Twitter, you can see that Adam has discovered a new buy-in level. This is it. Fantasy draft. They have a 1 cent Hail Mary contest. Oh boy. I think I have a few bucks left in my account. I'm going to max enter that one. How did you come across that one, Adam?
They emailed it to me.
They emailed it to you?
I apparently have a cent in my fantasy draft account. I thought that was the perfect tournament for me.
Oh goodness. I didn't know they had penny contests. This is beautiful. Hey, you know what? If you're on a budget or you want to keep score, and go against it, have a little vested rooting interest, there's nothing. It is what it is. Hopefully, Papa Gates and Chipotle Addict aren't in that one, but definitely enjoy yourself in those. Again, reminder as we're kind of wrapping things up here. You've got Adam that's going to be writing the deep dive today. We should have some more clarity here with some of the teams going through shoot around here shortly, so that will be posted probably about 3:30 today. We have the 6-game slate tipping off at 7 o'clock. There's that one lone 5 o'clock game between Milwaukee and the Knicks that we'll have some projections for and stuff, but most sites are just kind of ignoring that or doing it as a single game slate. Later this afternoon, you will get On the Contrary with Alex Osimo Baker and Evan Silva. That will be hosted by Chris Spags. Live Before Lock this evening around 6 o'clock. Fast Eddie Fair is going to go live there with that. And then from 11 up until kickoff tomorrow, we got back-to-back shows for the NFL. So you will want to jump on into there. And then I'll drop the link here in chat one more time. The Fred Van Elite Fan Club. I have to play Fred Van Vliet. You guys don't have to. That is what makes this a good contest for you guys. So jump on in there. Any final thoughts as we wrap up today's analysis?
I should have the deep dive article out between 3 and 4 Eastern. I'll be around in Slack for any subscribers that want to talk up the lock. So good luck tonight, guys.
All right. With that, gamers, good luck.